mynews.studio.
A blackout hit 60 million people, plunging huge parts of the Iberian Peninsula into darkness. Yet just 9 months later, Portugal's grid bounced back and now runs mostly on renewables. How did they manage such a turnaround?
Today is February 24th, 2026. Let's take it from the top. Last April, a massive blackout left 60 million without power across Spain and Portugal. Right away, a lot of people pointed fingers at renewables. But is that really what went wrong?
Actually, no. After investigations, it turned out the blackout started at conventional power plants, issues with equipment, and poor grid planning. Renewables weren't to blame. That detail really shaped Portugal's next steps. Rather than scaling back, they decided to modernize the grid and lean further into renewables.
So, instead of pulling away from renewables, they went the other way. Now, just 9 months later, Portugal reports that over 80% of its electricity comes from renewables. That's the highest in the EU. Only Norway is ahead in all of Europe. How did Portugal pull that off so soon after a major crisis?
They focused on 3 main sources: hydropower, wind, and solar. In January, hydropower made up about 37% of electricity, wind was just over 35%, and solar contributed around 4%. Here's something striking. For 210 separate hours that month, renewables alone met all of Portugal's electricity needs. And this wasn't just a headline. It saved the country €703 million by cutting down on natural gas use.
And while doing all this, they reached a new milestone. The grid handled peak demand above 10 gigawatts for the first time ever. Still, the system stayed stable. So the usual argument that renewables threaten grid reliability, does it still stand?
Not in this scenario. Portugal's experience shows that with targeted investment in the grid, renewables and reliability aren't mutually exclusive. There is a complication, though. Europe's grid was originally designed for big, centralized fossil fuel plants, not for wind farms or solar fields that tend to be far from cities. Transmission bottlenecks are now a real challenge.
And it's not unique to Portugal. For example, the UK sometimes has to shut down wind farms because the grid can't absorb all the power. Poland faces similar issues with solar. The European Commission estimates that by 2030, nearly €600 billion will be needed for grid upgrades. Is Portugal taking action to get ahead of these problems?
They are. Portugal's pushing forward with grid investment and aiming for 80% renewables by 2026. That's actually 4 years ahead of their original goal. Offshore wind is a big part of the expansion, with a target of 10 gigawatts by 2030. Plus, they're putting money into hydrogen production and battery storage to make the grid more adaptable.
Let's get into the technical side for a moment. After the blackout, what specific steps did Portugal take to stabilize its grid?
First, they tackled the root cause, cascading overvoltage, by updating transmission and distribution infrastructure. They also improved demand management, which means adjusting when and where electricity gets used. The mix of hydro, wind, and solar made the supply more balanced. Plus, real-time data and digital controls helped boost reliability.
So, it's not just about technology upgrades, but also about how the system is managed day to day. What about the policy side? Could other countries use this approach?
The approach is adaptable, but you need political commitment, funding, and coordination. Portugal used incentives for investment, sped up the permitting process, and made sure utilities, industry, and government were all on board. Geography gives them plenty of sun, wind, and water, but the main ideas are relevant elsewhere.
Grid congestion and storage keep coming up as issues. What solutions is Portugal testing as its renewable share grows?
They're experimenting with hydrogen as a way to store energy, building more battery facilities, and even piloting floating solar panels. But the standout innovation is in grid interconnections, basically sharing power across regions and developing smart grids that can adjust demand automatically.
Taking a step back, what does Portugal's story suggest for other countries? Is it realistic to reach high renewable targets and still keep the grid stable?
Portugal shows it's possible, as long as you invest in both the renewables and the infrastructure to support them. The blackout was a signal. You can't ignore grid modernization. But with careful planning, countries can achieve both clean energy and reliability.
To recap, Portugal experienced Europe's biggest blackout in decades, rebuilt its system, and now leads the EU in renewable electricity. Their approach, diversifying sources, upgrading the grid, and investing in storage, looks like a practical roadmap for others.
The energy transition isn't just about adding renewables. It's about making the whole system smarter and more resilient. Portugal's data shows this shift isn't just theoretical. It's already happening.
That covers it. Portugal took a crisis and turned it into a chance to lead. Now, all eyes in Europe are on what they do next.
Thanks for joining us as we explored how Portugal's grid moved from blackout to breakthrough.
If you're following the transformation in energy, Portugal just raised the bar. Thank you for listening. This episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. Give it a try for free.